Chris Perez, welcome to the Creative Gap podcast. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Carlo.
So I just want to get a little bit of a background about who you are, where you come from.
Yeah, so I'm a partner in a law firm based here in Los Angeles, Donaldson, Carlo, Perez. I'm one of three partners, and we've been around for about 18 years. I've been a part of the firm for 15 years, and it's evolved from a firm that was called Donaldson and Carlo until about 5 years ago when it became Donaldson, Carlo, Perez. So kind of progressed, through the firm over that period of time. I grew up here in Los Angeles, born and raised, went away for a little bit for different jobs, but there was always something pulling me back to LA, right? I didn't always know that I wanted to be an entertainment lawyer, but I kind of just listened to whatever life was telling me to do to keep coming back here. And family is really important to me, so I decided to stay. And given that, I'm in a law firm, with my name on it, it's very unlikely that I'm ever going to leave LA.
Right.
So I'm probably going to stick around here for a while.
Cool.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very rare that you hear someone born and raised in LA and stays. I feel like LA is a place where people just like converge to from all over the world. What was it like kind of growing up in Los Angeles?
Yeah, it's interesting because, it feels like I'm in Hollywood now, not physically in Hollywood, but in the business. Mm-hmm. And growing up, it might as well have been like 1,000 miles away, right? Because I grew up in Westchester, which is, if you fly into LA, you fly into Westchester. If you know where the Randy's Donut is, that's exactly where I grew up, like on the border of Westchester and Inglewood. And it was everyday people. So it could have been any city. No one in my family worked in entertainment. I had one uncle that wasn't around a lot that was an animator who actually worked on Pinky and the Brain.
Oh, that's awesome.
But other than that, it was really distant. And there also weren't a lot of creatives in my family. So that was another thing where it didn't seem like a viable path, or at least one that I really knew about. So, the cool thing is that so many of my friends now are people that I grew up with. And when you combine that with people coming from all over the world to this incredible place, it's a great mix of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Growing up, did you always have kind of a goal to become a lawyer, work in law? What was your kind of goal as a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? And I guess as you've kind of grown into teenager, you go to college. How did you start to find your path as in a pursuit of law?
Yeah, so the law was always kind of there in the background. My dad was actually a lawyer, and he was probably one of the first Chicano lawyers. Oh, wow. In the late 60s, right? He went to UCLA Law, and the way he would describe it is he kind of he didn't know what he was doing. Like he went to Venice High School, he went to Santa Monica College, just because he didn't want to get a job. And then, I think the way he would describe it is a little less intentional than it actually was, but because it was hard work at that time. Definitely. Somebody inspired him to go to law school because he was a smart guy, and he figured, okay, this is a good way to make money. And it ended up being an incredible thing for him that opened up a lot of doors, even though it was really difficult at the time for someone from his background. And that always inspired me.
Yep.
I didn't know that that's what I wanted to do, but after doing a lot of different things up until, a couple years after I graduated from college, I really decided being a lawyer and going to law school is a great way to combine a lot of different interests if you are the kind of person like me that just loves to do a lot of different things.
Right.
So
what were some of the things that you enjoyed doing?
Well, I loved, at the time, film and television, right? Okay. I did film and TV in college. I took a few production classes, but it was mostly from the perspective of like film criticism. Okay. So there was a point where I thought, okay, I'm going to be a film professor. And didn't really happen, but I always knew that film and television was really important to me after I went to college. I also worked in sports, in particular soccer.
Oh, nice.
And
Big soccer fan
oh,
here.
you are?
Yeah, I
Okay,
love
great.
soccer.
Awesome. Yeah, it's still a big part of my life. I'm actually coaching my daughter's soccer team. She's
Oh,
6 years
amazing.
old, so this is the first time I'm coaching, which
Oh,
is
very cool.
it's interesting
Oh,
coaching 6 year old
I want to
girls.
dig into that a little bit
Okay,
later. Yeah,
let's do it.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the arts, sports. I mean, there really isn't anything that I consume as an everyday person that's not interesting to me. And so I'm also a very, I guess, I enjoy school. I enjoy the learning process. And I think that being a lawyer gives you an everyday opportunity to do that, to constantly be learning and constantly reading and writing and improving your craft. I saw that in my dad. So even though I didn't know the specific path, I knew that law school afforded me the opportunity to go on a lot of different paths. And going into law school, I thought maybe I'll be an international human rights lawyer. Right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even though I really didn't know what that meant. I
Right.
thought, well, this is going to be doing good for people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can travel the world. I've seen a few movies about this kind of stuff and do gooder. And I took a human rights course my second year, and just like within 3 days, I was like, I'm not going to do this. No way. I understood what it was to be that, and I'm obviously still interested in those issues, but I knew that was not for me.
Right.
And at the same time, I took an intellectual property class, which was like copyright, fair use, trademark, and patent, even though it's not really relevant to what I do. But I took that and I instantly knew, okay, this is the connective tissue between film and television and law, and this is exactly what I wanted to do. And then once I was on that path, that was like really the first time in my life where I was like, okay, this is where I want to go. And certain things conspired at that point to push me in that direction.
Amazing.
And when I left law school was to go to this firm. So it's really the only place I've been since law school. Which, if you told me that was going to happen, I would have told you that it's crazy, because I'm not the kind of person to stay in one place.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
How did you find the connection with them? Was it throughout school? Did you have an internship? Like, how did you build a relationship?
Yeah, so my partner, Michael Donaldson, he's kind of a legend in this area. And he, at the time, the firm was only two people. It was him and Lisa Calf, who's also my partner now. And I was working on a project where he came on as pro bono counsel in this legal clinic. And it was like an 8-month job interview, even though I didn't really know or think that he was thinking of me as a potential new hire, especially with like a firm that was only two people. I was thinking, well, he's never going to just hire me, But at the end of that clinic, he just offered me a job, and I was like, this is my dream. Particularly because at that time, and this was 15 years ago, his was the only firm that was really specializing in representing documentary filmmakers. Now, we represent independent filmmakers, like scripted and documentary. But at that time, and this is before the big, documentary boom,
Right.
it was, it couldn't sustain more than a couple firms to represent documentary filmmakers. So I thought that was a really cool niche, and I love documentaries. So to be able to get in at the ground floor with him was just right place, right time. And I've been here ever since. So
Love
it's
that.
worked out. Yeah.
I feel like to become a lawyer, I have a friend that just graduated law school, and for a couple years, it seems like he had to dedicate like every minute of every day to studying and just like making sure that he was on top of everything. So I'm curious from your perspective and your background, the importance of kind of just like really dedicating time to your career, but also trying to find time to work on maybe relationships outside of work, finding a partner, hanging out with friends, et cetera. Like, what was that balance like for you?
It's a great question. I think at certain parts of my life, to be honest, there wasn't a balance.
Right.
And I ignored certain relationships, or I let them slip away, or they weren't groomed in a way that they should have been. But I do think I am a true believer in the fact that you can do both at once. You can dedicate as much time as you need to law school in my specific, example, but also kind of putting in the time and effort to build a career in a way that you're giving as much as you need in order to get to where you need to go. Now, there's extreme situations, right? I mean, there are firms out there, I'm sure you've heard the horror stories where it's like you go to a big firm, they demand you bill 2,200 hours a year, or you're fired, or you don't get your bonus, and all that kind of thing. And people hit those hours.
It seems
and it's
intense.
a huge personal sacrifice.
All right.
And I talk to law students all the time. They're at that crossroads. They're saying, like, listen, I have $300,000 worth of debt. I really want to get into entertainment law, but I have this offer from a big firm. I'm going to go there first, right? I'm going to make my $150,000 or $200,000 a year, pay off my debt, and then I'm going to come back to entertainment. And what I tell them is, that's fine, but you always have to remember what you want to do. You got to come back, right? It's not easy going straight into entertainment, and maybe you're not going to get paid as much at first, but sometimes that's the safer route to preserve your dream, to preserve what you want to do. Because what happens is you go to a big law firm, you get the golden handcuffs, is what they call it. It's like you get that big salary, you buy a nice car, you buy a nice house, you get the mortgage, you get all the things, and now you're stuck with all those things for the rest of your life.
Right.
So that's I never went the big firm route. I mean, I almost did, but it was never really something that attracted me. So I'm glad I kind of avoided that.
What about entertainment made you really commit to it early on rather than going to that big law firm? Like, was it a strong feeling of passion for it that made you decide?
Well, I knew if I was going into law that I would have to be, and this is kind of around the time when I took intellectual property, where it kind of all came together. I said, well, if I'm not going to be creating, then I want to be next to creators. I want to be helping them in a meaningful way. And I want to be facilitating. I think that there are jobs within the industry that are not facilitating. There are lawyers out there who are, I just think that it's nice to be in a position where you're working with artists and saying, okay, well, if this isn't legal, then we're going to find a way to make it work, right? As long as it's legal and we can get everybody else on board, this is your creative vision. You give me other ideas and I will tell you, okay, that you're going in the right direction or the wrong direction. This is your work, and I want to preserve it as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Because I'm a believer that the strongest form of self-expression really has to be the one that's least mediated by, frankly, people like me. Right? Like the people that are the studio execs.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit in terms of like just going in a little bit more detail about what could happen if maybe the people that you're describing are involved too much?
Well, I think there's degrees of risk that people are not willing to take. Something may be legal to do, for example, right? Let's take a specific example. If somebody wants to do a parody of a particular film, and let's say it's a huge franchise film, right? And I were to say, well, under the law, looking at the statutes and looking at the case law, I think you can do this, right? And I'm willing to put my name on the line. I'm willing to write an opinion letter and help you get insurance. That's just one step. The next step is, how do I get it distributed, right? And other people might say, well, this is a great film, but we're not willing to take on the legal risk. So maybe you need to change it. Maybe you need to adjust it. Maybe you need to pull it back. Maybe you can't do the project at all, right? And so, and I understand that because there are corporate interests at play.
Yeah.
But the fact is that, let's just say this film was great and really unique, and and powerful, we need more of those, right? And people need to be able to see them. But at the same time, they need avenues of distribution to be able to
Absolutely.
support those.
Right.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I'm like a lot of the people that I talk to are within the filmmaking space that are on the creative side. And we always talk
Hmm.
about like the collaboration between each other from artist to artist. But I'm curious about the collaboration between you and a producer or director, whoever that you're representing. How do you find that relationship? Do they reach out to you? And what makes you want to work with somebody and build that relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, we get a lot of referrals by word of mouth. We worked on such and such film, and maybe the independent film space, as I'm sure you know, it's very like an independent producer might be working on 5 different things at the same
Sure.
time.
Sure.
And so that producer was working with this other director who is doing this film, and they say, oh, well, Chris is the person you need to talk to. So we'll do a call and we'll figure out if we're the right fit, both from a subject matter standpoint, but also is this going to work, right? From a personality standpoint and expectations
Yeah.
standpoint. The relationships that I enjoy the most are the ones where people are very open to understanding what the value that I can bring to a project. And they also know that given the way I approach projects, I'm not going to overstep my bounds. I know that this is your work, but I'm going to try to facilitate it as much as possible, right? So an example might be the first one that always comes to mind is this filmmaker named Matt Johnson, who's
Okay.
based out of Toronto.
Matt Johnson. Is he Matt Johnson? Does he do YouTube as well? Am I thinking of the right guy?
He might have he maybe used to, but he did The
Okay.
Dirties, which is I think it premiered at Sundance back in like
Oh, okay. I might be thinking of a
2010.
different Matt Johnson then.
Okay. Yeah, it's a common name, right?
Yeah, it is. I guess. Yeah.
The latest one that he did was a film called Blackberry, which
Okay.
was the true
Oh,
story of
yeah.
Blackberry,
Absolutely.
right?
I think I watched that last maybe 2 months ago on the plane. I've seen it a couple times, but I saw it pretty
Yeah.
recently again.
It's a really fun movie,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that was a challenge because we pretty much didn't get permission from anyone, right? So one of the things that people come to me for is films that are based on a true story, and maybe you have permission from 1 or 2 people upon whom that film is based, but you don't have permission from anybody else. You also don't have permission to use certain clips that are used in the film or use trademarks. Like, we have to obviously be concerned about RAM, which is the company that, ran Blackberry. And so I work with the filmmakers to ensure that they can actually release this film without permission, right? Because a lot of people wouldn't want the film to actually be released because it's in some ways negative, but it's
Sure.
in some ways not, right?
Right.
So the ideal filmmaker is someone like Matt who brings me into the creative process at a really early stage and says, number one, can I do this? Sure, yes. Okay, subject to a few conditions. Okay, we have a script. Can you look at it? Great. Okay, here's what we need to, pivot. But you're going on the right path. And then finally getting to the place where they have a finalized script, we sign off on it, and then we review the cut and we, work on that front as well. But it's just a really collaborative process.
That's awesome.
The client that is not so great is the one that sees me as an impediment, right? So it said, I don't want to share this with the attorney until the absolute last second, and
They
hopefully
think
we
you're
can get over the
blocking
line.
they think you're blocking their creative freedom potentially.
Right. When what I would like to think is that the more information that I have, the more prepared I can be, the better advocate that I can be for you, right? And help you
Right.
make, adjustments on the fly as they come up. So, and that's, most filmmakers, most of my clients are like Matt. So I don't want to give the impression that it's like, a mix of these people. It's really a blessing to represent people like him and to
Love
have the
that.
clients that we have. Yeah.
When you were talking about the BlackBerry movie and, not getting permission, it kind of sparked a question that I think sometimes in terms of, business owners or freelancers or creatives where you have to have a certain risk tolerance and find that as you kind of grow. I'm curious, I believe you said you've been with this firm for about 15 years. How has your risk tolerance changed, or your confidence within yourself to say, yes, this is allowed, like you are allowed to do this, or no, you're not, compared to when you started to where you are now?
I think it's evolved. When I first joined the firm in 2009, my partner, Michael Donaldson, the first thing I noticed about him was that he was really willing to take risks, big ones, right? And at the time, we were working on some big films, but most of them were pretty small. And we were working on a lot of documentaries that not a lot of people were seeing, right? So the documentary industry didn't have the avenues of distribution that it has now, right? Netflix existed, but primarily still as a DVD business
Right.
at that point, right? So Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and Apple, they were all just taking off at the same time, which led to this flourishing of the documentary market. And all of a sudden, everybody realized everybody loves a good documentary, whether it's true crime or it's a beautiful film about, a little boy in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it could have been anything, right? An athlete. And so there was this proliferation of content. Now, at a certain point, we can take the same risks on those films, but there's more stuff at stake. There's more money, right? Which means there are more stakeholders, which means there's more people saying, well, I don't know about this because, there's a lot more money involved, or, whoever we're doing an expose on somebody, they have deep pockets. So the bigger and bigger it gets, the bigger the risk gets. And I would say that my tolerance for risk is relatively the same, but I have more considerations and I have more, gatekeepers to deal with,
Right.
which makes it more complicated. But that's kind of been my guiding light, is to say, just because that exists, just because there is more at stake, doesn't that I should keep that in mind and be realistic with the client. But I also want to, have the same attitude that I did in 2009, which is, if you want to make your film this way and it's legal, then I'm going to do everything in my power to make it happen.
Do you find that the collaboration aspect between you and your client, sometimes the client wants you to take more risk and sometimes they want you to be more conservative with your approach?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I do have clients that are bigger, that have more corporate interests, and they tell me right off the bat, they say, listen, I know that you might think that this is legal, but this is our risk tolerance. So,
Right.
if we want to stay in this lane, let us know if the content essentially meets that standard. And that's really helpful. It's just like keeping the lines of communication open to know what they want.
Absolutely.
There are other clients who say, we want you to be more liberal. And what I tell them is like, this is about as liberal as it gets. Like, I'm basically reading the law and the case law. And if you can do it, and I can convince everybody, all those gatekeepers, all those stakeholders that it's okay, then we've done our job.
Right.
What I won't do is say something okay if I don't believe that the case law allows for it, right? Even if I really, really want the film to be out, because I can't put my name on that, then for them to get sued and for us to lose, there goes our reputation.
Absolutely.
Right. So
I want to transition into a topic or a question that is probably one of my top questions in terms of like things that are interested, what I'm interested in at this moment. And it's something that I'm always trying to figure out is, what in your life right now, looking at your career, your family, where do you wake up and find the most joy in your life right now? I know I'm transitioning a little bit out of that topic, but I just want to kind of find a new avenue a little bit there.
Every day it's different, but I will say in the last 4 or 5 years, I've had a completely, like, a huge flip in my life. And it's kind of coincided with finding or associating with a much stronger spiritual side of myself. And I would say the moment that I wake up and take a deep breath and hear something, it sounds strange, but it's a completely different experience than when I used to wake up before, right? Which it wasn't that I would wake up and be filled with dread, but there were moments when I was so anxious or so caught up with, the logical things that fill up our day of, I
Absolutely.
got to do this, I got to do that, like an ongoing laundry list of things that I could never get out of that spiral, right? I could never get outside the scope of, I got to do this. And there came a moment, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago, where I started waking up and I started just living. I started appreciating the fact that I'm breathing, the fact that I can hear a bird outside, the fact
Right.
that I have, a beautiful wife next to me and my kids are running in, and it's just an appreciation for those small things, for being alive that I didn't even know was there before, which is kind of crazy because I'd lived my whole life a certain way up to that point, and then there was a
Did you
shift.
find you lacked presence for a while, maybe within your family?
I think I lacked presence. I think I lacked what I would call like a lightness, which is, and maybe that's the same thing, which is being, I think I was so obsessed with my career, right, that I poured pretty much everything into it. I put in a lot of hours,
Yeah.
and I would say my whole reason for being, you could say, which is kind of scary to think about it now, was to get to a certain place.
I think that's for
And
a lot of people in terms of career. That's like a lot of people's focus in life is to reach that status, that goal of a career and that money, that financial thing.
yeah, yeah. And I wouldn't say I'm like at the mountaintop or anything like that, but I got to a certain place, and this is very common because I talk to my friends about this. It's like you get to a certain place and you look around and you say, okay, yeah, I'm here.
Right.
What now, right? And you realize
Did
you're
you
you're
it's
filling.
maybe like you expected something different.
Yeah, you're trying to fill something up that
Right.
that doesn't fill it up, or at least not. It only does it on a temporary basis because you're constantly going to be looking for something else, grappling for things, and so you realize that there are a lot of other things to be focused on, including just what's going on around you in the given moment, and to start to be more intentional about surrounding yourself with people that you truly love and care about and want to attract.
Right.
I think the big thing that I've learned in the last couple years is focusing on exhibiting an energy that will bring people into my circle that I want to be around and that give me a lot of energy,
Yeah.
right? I met with a client in New York a few months ago, and we were just marveling at the fact that, like, oh, if you draw this, line here and you draw this line here, like we're both interested in this, and what a coincidence! And so and so, and
Yeah.
he's also into this. And did you know that this artist was influenced by this singer and blah blah blah? And oh, he's my favorite. Oh, we're both soccer fans. Like I said, this is not a coincidence. This is because you and I have both made efforts in our life to, exude this energy and to bring these people together. And now we're in a big circle, and now we're collaborating. Now we're working together. Now we're rowing in the same direction. And to put that energy out, it may seem counterintuitive. You don't lose that energy. It just builds and it
Right.
multiplies and it gives you more energy
I
in a
agree.
positive way.
I think by putting out that energy too, you attract, like you said, a certain type of person that you maybe a group or new people. But I also feel that I had a transition point in my life where I was a certain person and I wanted to become this new person. And in that process, I found new people, I found my new group, but I also lost a lot of people that I
Hmm.
called friends, I called, that I would love to be around. Did you have a similar experience, like where you kind of maybe had to lose people that were bringing you down or providing like a negative energy?
I did.
Was that
Yeah.
tough?
Um, it was. Yeah. It was a little bit of a death, right?
Mm,
And all of those little things combined to define what you might have called a new you, right?
Right.
Because now those people are no longer part of your life, and you can't associate with them in the way that you used to, or maybe you don't associate with them at all.
Mm.
It was interesting because I was listening to another podcast I listen to pretty frequently. It's the Rich Roll
Okay.
podcast,
Yeah, for sure.
and he was talking. I forgot who the guest was, but they were going back and forth on figuring out how many iterations of themselves they were up to that point in their life. So Rich
That's an
Roll was
interesting
saying,
thought.
he said, I think I'm like on Rich Roll 4.0 or 5.0.
Mm.
And I was like, man, I don't think maybe I'm 1.0, 2.0, because I can't, up until 4 or 5 years ago, I was not, I felt like I was Chris Perez 1.0, A, B, C, D maybe, but still
Yeah.
1.0. And it wasn't until recently where I was like, okay, I'm definitely at least 2.0.
Mm.
So there are these break points in your life that you can look at and say, okay, now I was that person. I don't regret it, but
Of course.
I would never do that again. And I think I would never really intentionally hang out with that group of people anymore. And I look at that in a very positive way. So, it sounds like you had that moment
Yeah,
as well.
I definitely did. And, obviously, similarly, I don't regret any of it because, I feel like part of what I am referencing to was kind of like my later high school. And maybe I went to college for a year and a half and then I dropped out. But that year and a half of college, high school, I had a conversation with my friends last night. We were smoking cigars and just like chatting, and we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about this. And I just recognized like how different of a person I am than what I was. And it also dawned on me just like how much work I kind of had to put in to actually become potentially this new person.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know if that's just me of just like wanting to study a little bit more about how to become a better human, maybe trying to find a new faith or trying to work on my relationships better. Were there things that you did to kind of help improve yourself? Did you study different things? How did you find that new version of you?
Well, I knew it was a spiritual movement, essentially, and that begins in the heart, right?
Mm,
And the issue that I have is that I constantly want to move from the heart to the head, right? And
mm,
that is my basic instinct
yeah.
as a lawyer, as a little kid who wanted to maybe be a lawyer, who had a lawyer dad,
Mm.
and
Is it like a
whose dad
balance of
was.
feeling versus logic type of thing?
Well, I think that you can have both, and both are very important. But it's kind of a left brain, right brain thing, right? It's
Sure.
like you want to shift to the left brain constantly, where that's the instinct, and you always kind of have to pull it back. So at first, and I think to this day, it's still my instinct is to buy books that talk about this and read
Mm,
about them. And what I would do is ingest tons and tons of podcasts and books and speakers and panelists, all sorts of stuff. But at a certain point, I was like, I'm not ingesting this in a way that's making my life better.
right.
So how do I actually implement this on a day-to-day basis? And some of it's meditation, or what I consume, what my meditation practice is. Some of it's what I talked about in terms of making a conscious decision to be myself as much as possible and to bring into my orbit the people that I get energy from and who I can give positive energy to. And that's really been it. And just to curate the relationships that I already have that are really important to me. And that's putting in the time.
Absolutely.
And it's not, with my kids and my wife, it's not hard. That's what I really want to do right now is go home and spend time with them and cook dinner and
Right.
wrestle on the floor and that kind of stuff. It's actually really easy. But there are those relationships out there where we've got filters going on
Absolutely.
all the time, and it's like, well, how many can I try to lift the filter on this? Are they going to judge me?
Mm,
And that's hard. That's the stuff that I'm trying to work on.
When you became, potentially when you became a father, how did you notice a change within yourself as a human, as a man, as a husband? Because that's also something that I'm curious about from other people's perspective, is just like you were someone, you were something, this happened, and now you have to become this new thing, this new
Hmm.
person. What was that transition like for you?
Well, I think the first thing to mention was that um, I think I had always said I wanted kids, but it was more out of like, I guess that's what you do,
Mm,
and when you get married and then you have kids, I wasn't one of those people that thought, I definitely want to have kids. I definitely want to be a father. And I also didn't think, well, maybe I don't want to be. I didn't really have a strong opinion about it
sure.
up until the point that my daughter was born. And I remember she came out, I pretty much passed out. And that's mostly not because out of joy, it's because we had been through like almost 48 hours of labor and I was delirious to the point where they were like spending more time on me than the baby. They're like, we need to get you to a different room. So imagine how my wife felt.
I can't.
Uh,
I can't.
it's
Yeah, it's
insane.
intense.
It's a lot of
Wow.
it's a lot of stuff going on. But you have a kid, and this is actually pretty common with fathers, where we got a lot of this advice. They say, listen, if you don't feel a love connection within the first few days, or even the first few weeks, the first few months, don't panic. You're not a bad person. It just means that there's not a lot going on in terms of give and take, right? So if you
Mm,
don't have that moment where it's like, oh my God, my life has changed and my daughter's everything, don't panic. And that definitely happened with me, where I I loved her for certainly, but it wasn't this moment, this shift. But the shift happened. It was like, well, my life's different. It's not about me anymore,
right.
and it is about her. And I'm going to give her everything that I can to allow her to be the fullest person that she can be.
Mm,
Right. Which I
yeah.
think is an important distinction from giving her everything.
I think that
As a
is great.
parent, I think it's something that you have
Yeah.
to really, be careful about. So,
Mm. You talked about becoming a coach for your daughter now.
mhm.
What is that kind of fulfillment like for you? Like, what is it in terms of being able to teach your daughter something other than just like, maybe stuff at home, but now you're
Mhm.
introducing an athletic, a competition, a sort of like sportsmanship aspect. From a father's perspective, what made you want to do that? And do you find it to be like really fulfilling?
Well, it just started 2 weeks ago,
Mm,
so it's been
it's fresh.
it's fresh.
Yeah.
It's 5 and 6 year old girls, right? So half of it is
Fun.
soccer, and half of it's
Yeah.
corralling kids that are lying on the floor picking
Right,
flowers,
right.
right?
Yeah.
But it's really fun. It is really fun because I've doing my background in terms of looking at drills that I can
Mhm.
do for 5 year olds that'll keep them entertained, which is mostly like kick the ball at me until I fall over and then jump on me. But like you said, it's all about fun. I think the other part of it is that I'm realizing that this season will be about, which is helping them understand what it is to be a team and to work as
Team.
a team together, right?
Mm,
And then if you lose, what is sportsmanship? Like you
right.
said, what does that look like?
Mm,
It's interesting because my partner, Lisa Caloff, always says she likes to recruit people into our firm that have played team sports, like significantly. And maybe not professionally, but just people that have had that team experience. Because she
yeah, they
says
understand the dynamic.
you can understand what it means to be there for a teammate, to pick them up, to be
Mm,
part of a team competitively in a competitive environment. And that's not to say that somebody who hasn't had that experience doesn't know how to do that, but to be in that world on a consistent basis, you know what it means to rely on each other and to not be able to do it all by yourself. It's a collaborative environment in the way that we have here at the firm.
mm.
So we actually do look for that on a resume. It's like, have you
Wow.
played maybe not a sports team, but some kind of you know serious competitive effort together where you're having to work with other people.
Mm.
So back to my daughter's team, it's really not about like creating a world class
Of course.
soccer player.
Yeah.
Maybe down the road.
Eventually.
Yeah, eventually, but it's a learning experience for me more than
Mm,
probably them. Yeah.
mm. What made you want to do it?
Um, well, I have a good friend, so I still play soccer. I play on
Yeah.
Friday
Or do you
nights.
play men's,
Yeah, in a
yeah.
men's league.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Is it super
I
competitive?
it's about as yeah, it's pretty competitive.
Mm,
I'm 41, so it's mostly about like me staying in good enough shape to hang with like, kids that are, I'd say kids, but like young guys that are like in their 20s and early
yeah.
30s. So it's kind of a way for me to just make sure that I'm still, okay.
You still
But
got it.
still
Yeah.
got it. Exactly. Exactly. So my friend and I kind of co-manage the team, and he's got three daughters, but they're all a little bit older, and he's been
Okay.
coaching them. And so I texted him. I was like, "Hey, she's starting her season. What do you recommend? Should I like referee or coach or whatever?" He's like, "You definitely need to coach." He said, "No excuses." He
Wow.
said, half the people that sign up for this, she's going to get a head coach that's never played soccer, that doesn't understand the game." He said, "It's your duty as someone who knows the sport to really do it. They would
Mm,
really benefit from that." So on that basis, I decided to do it, and I don't regret it. It's awesome. It's
all
fun.
right.
Yeah.
I love that. Do you find that there's like, I guess like from where you are in your career, like you've allowed yourself to almost focus on other things than work? I find that to be a struggle sometimes
Hmm.
for me, maybe, and some people that I talk to, where I find myself so focused on my work, trying to build my career, trying to grow, that I do forget that I should dedicate time for family and friends and all these
Hmm.
things. But it seems like at this point in your life, you are really active in seeking the opportunity to kind of separate yourself from work. And like, do you find it to be difficult to kind of be home and not think about work, or have you grown to find the distinction to become easier for you?
I'm getting better at it.
Yeah.
I don't think I'll ever be in the position to say, well, I've completely mastered that side of things, especially
That's
since like,
that'd
you
be
know,
insane.
yeah, I mean, it's a law firm, and the work life balance fluctuates. I mean, sometimes it's really good, and sometimes I got to go home and do the dad stuff, and then get back on the computer at 9 at night. But luckily, it's stuff that I'm not dreading. It's stuff that I really enjoy
Mm,
doing,
mm,
and that's the biggest challenge. It's like, if you break it down, if I leave the office at 5, I get home, I cook dinner at 5:30, I spend 5:30 to 8:30 or
mhm.
9 with the kids. Then I've got work or exercise. So it's like I want to be as present as possible for those 3 hours. Can I do it? I'm getting better at it.
Right.
I do. I will say that there's been a noticeable shift in the world since COVID. That people are much more understanding of the fact that we have personal lives and that we don't want to mix work
Yeah.
with life sometimes.
Mm,
For me, I don't think I'll ever really be able to kind of completely pull those two things apart, but maybe I don't
mm,
need to do that.
right. Do you think that, I think it was in one of my last questions in terms of just like parenthood and kind of that world, do you find that having a career that you're truly passionate about and that you love, you wake up every day and you're excited to go to work, has a direct impact on the way that you are as a parent and like a husband and your relationship at home?
Yes, I do. I think that what I've arrived at is it's not necessarily about having a job or a profession where you wake up every day excited to do it. There's going to be days that you're
Mm,
dreading. There are going to be days where you're nervous about something. Maybe you're going a little bit outside of your comfort zone, which is another big thing I think people have to do to keep growing. It's got to be something that is just like life in general. What is your purpose? What is your drive?
mm,
If you don't have that purpose, you're essentially blowing in the wind,
right.
right? So if it's not your job, then maybe that's okay. But you got to be doing something, whether in the form of family, if you're religious, it's your church. If it's sports, you're dedicating your life towards being the best that you could possibly be. It's got to be, in my opinion, a big part of your life that is guiding you and gives you the conviction to get up every day and be your best. It's kind of like, I hear the stories about, people coming back from war and having a really hard time integrating back into, normal everyday life.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is attributed to the fact that they had this important cause that this team was 100% working towards. They come back and they don't have that, right? They go to a normal job that they're not passionate about. They don't have that team ethic. They don't, and so that loss of purpose is really devastating. So whatever you're doing, if you're passionate about one thing and you lose that, I think you got to find something else, pick it back up. Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that. This podcast has a lot of listeners and people that engage with it that are young filmmakers that are hungry to start their career, create their next film, create their first film. From your perspective, what is something that a young filmmaker should look for in wanting to pursue a relationship with an attorney? Why is that an important relationship for a first-time filmmaker, a young filmmaker?
Well, I think that it's really helpful to attend in some way some kind of class or panel, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a class that's taught by a lawyer, but it could be another class that a lawyer comes into, or maybe it's an organization that puts on some kind of session where a lawyer comes in and just gives you the basics. I think that's really important. I teach a lot. I don't actually teach a full course, but I'll come in for like Film Independent or International Documentary Association, and I'll do like a 3-hour crash course on whatever, right? And it's usually the audience is filmmakers, producers, things like that. And the first thing I always tell them is, this is not a class. Don't try to memorize anything. Like, I went through 3 years of law school to learn this shit, and now I'm for 15 years and I still barely know it. So what I'm telling you is...
Don't expect to learn it in 3 hours.
Exactly. 3 hours is not going to work. So what you're going to do is just what they call in law school issue spot, right? You don't know the answer, but you know that it's an issue when it comes up, right? So you're writing a screenplay, you're thinking about, I was inspired by this film or this television program. I'm going to create a character that's kind of like this, right? Now that should be ringing alarm bells. Do I need to get permission? I don't know. Talk to an attorney, right? Oh, I'm entering a collaboration with a writer. Do I need an agreement? Yes, probably. Do I need to register a copyright? All of these issues, you don't necessarily have to have the answer, but you have to know this is the point at which I need to talk to somebody, right? And most attorneys in town, most entertainment attorneys, if you get to the right person, will be gracious enough to give you, if it's within their wheelhouse, to give you 20 to 30 minutes of their time for free to just say, like, hey, am I the right fit? This is my issue. What are the fees associated with it? How do you charge?
That's a great point.
Like, I think that people should do that as much as possible. Shop around. Maybe don't go with the first person that you call, but, ask among your cohort, whoever's in your group, to, who do you go to for legal advice? And just make as many connections as possible. But it really is just like any other relationship about finding a connection and making sure that you are heading in the right direction. Your intentions are the same. Yeah.
I think you just brought up a really great point that I appreciate you saying, because I feel like a lot of young filmmakers potentially have like a fear of maybe reaching out to an attorney or a law firm because of that price aspect, because you always kind of hear lawyers are expensive. So how do you kind of bridge that gap, or just like approach filmmakers? How do you get them to get the confidence to even reach out potentially? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think that I can only speak to my experience in like the classroom setting where when I'm telling them, listen, if you want to talk to a lawyer, I'm happy to, give you 20, 30 minutes to see if this is the right fit. I do believe that most entertainment attorneys, most of my colleagues in this field are like that, right? And you might reach out to an attorney who never responds or who says, listen, I don't practice in that area, but they could give you a referral. I think the takeaway is just ask questions.
Right.
If you're afraid of them charging you on this initial consult, just say, "Hey, you're not going to charge me for this, are you?" And usually, even if they were going to charge, they feel so guilty that you asked that question. Maybe you
Like,
get a freebie. Yeah, no, it's like, nah, forget about it. This one's freebie.
right.
Yeah, I mean, the initial intake calls, we don't charge for them, right? So I think that a lot of firms are like that. I would just encourage people to not be afraid to ask those questions. Yeah.
Similar to potentially similar to how us as filmmakers and on the creative side feel that this new whole topic of like technology and AI has kind of come into play and has striked a lot of potential fear in a lot of creators. From your perspective, from a law firm, how did you approach this new wave of technology, this new potential fear that people are feeling? How do you navigate something that is brand new and put it into action and work with creators to actually make it, something that could be tangible?
It's such a crazy thing that's happening right now,
Right.
and it's literally every day in our office that we're dealing with it, because we have a lot of clients who are dealing with it in a number of different ways. Number one, they're using it, right? So you might have a filmmaker who's making a true crime documentary, and they want to make a recreation of this person's home where a certain murder happened. 5 years ago, you had to go rent a house,
And film it.
at night, hire a crew to do a slow track around the house in a room and get the pillow and blood splatter. It's like you'd have to pay for all of that.
Right.
It'd be at least tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to do that. Now you can just do it on AI, and I've seen it, and it's getting better and better every day. So, from an industry standpoint, it's going to have to adjust, because that means less opportunities for people that were doing all of that work,
Right.
which is sad. But, technology's been doing that for so many years in different types of media. It's just evolving, and people are going to have to evolve in terms of what they bring
in a way
to a project. Yeah. So my hope is that ultimately AI will always be a supplement to human creativity, which is always going to be hopefully the starting point, right? We're always going to need and associate with, as humans, with this seed of human creativity, and AI is a neutral tool that, depending on who's using it, just like anything else, could be good or bad, right? Bad being, I created an AI replica of this actor without their permission and inserted them into my scripted film. And that's what SAG's worried about.
Right.
That's
Was
what,
it true? There was, I believe I heard something about background characters being modeled or getting like scanned, and then they're allowed to use that scan for whatever in the future, some sort of version like that. Is that, I don't remember where I heard that.
Well, that's what, so you remember the union stoppages from the last couple of years. So that's one of the things that SAG was negotiating for. They were saying you shouldn't be able to do that, right? Just because you use AI in one instance, which, by the way, if you use someone, you're going to have to pay for them. You can't use it again without paying
Again.
the person again, right? So there's lots of examples where producers can either hold on to assets that they've created, or use those assets to create new ones that are based on real people that aren't getting paid. So a lot of this stuff that was up for discussion was absolutely necessary at the time, and it's going to have to evolve again, probably in the near future, to address whatever technology creates in the next few years. But we have clients that are making documentaries about AI while also using AI as a way of commenting about it, which is really fascinating.
That's interesting. How does it play with like fair use potentially? Because I work mostly in the commercial space. I've done some narrative work, and I 99% of the 95% of the commercials that I shoot as I DP are things that I shoot, I light, I hire a crew. But then I've had conversations with producers where they're like, well, it could be more cost effective if I just do this thing over here with AI. And obviously they're still new to it, so they have to talk to the client about, is this legal? Can we get this go on TV? can this be run as an ad? Like, how
Yeah.
does that work in terms of just like fair use or being able to publicize it in like a marketing standpoint?
Yeah. It's, I mean, there's so many different things that you can do, right, with AI. So some of them I think will be legal and are legal at this moment, and some of them are illegal
Do you
or
mind
they have
sharing just like a
laws.
couple
So
little examples of things that are possible and things that you can't do? Just as some tangible items to take away.
yeah. So one, the AI recreation of an actor that I just mentioned,
Hmm.
that deals with name and likeness and voice issues that are addressed by what's called the right of publicity, which is the unauthorized commercial exploitation of someone's identity, right? So if someone wanted to recreate your podcast and
Right.
gathered all of this information that's available on the web, which includes your podcast, to recreate an AI version of you and to commercially profit from it,
Mm,
that's illegal, right?
yeah,
Because that's you and you have rights over your likeness in that capacity.
I see.
But if you were to do it in a way that was very obvious to the viewer that it wasn't you, and there was some kind of commentary about who the person what you represent and what you're doing, and this can apply to very famous people, controversial people.
Hmm.
If there's inherent commentary on it, or a joke or a parody, then it could be legal, right? But
Mm.
it's all
Is
about
it
how the viewer understands it. It's not a replacement, a literal replacement for you,
right?
right?
Is it? I see these things like made with AI. Is that statement like a hall pass for you to kind of
No,
do
no,
whatever?
no. I there's a lot going on in terms of what the standards should be for transparency, but
Mm,
that's more of standards and practices rather than what is actually legal or illegal.
right.
And where there's a lot of uncertainty in the law right now is these AI machines are ingesting all of this material, right? Now,
Yeah.
depending on which program you're using, some of them are working with a more closed environment and some of them are working with the entire internet, right?
Mm,
The ones that are working in a closed environment often are just taking licensed materials and ingesting that to create a learning model, which then spits out material, right?
sure. Sure.
That is less risky and usually legal because you're using stuff that you have a right to use. Your
Because it's
library is
licensed.
contained. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. The other stuff is just grabbing everything that's available in order to create a learning model.
Mm,
And what the law is grappling with right now is that legal? Like, should you be able to grab all of this material from the internet, first to teach the model and then to create whatever you've asked it to
mm.
create?
Is the struggle because you're taking something from over here, 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 combining this new thing? So is that where the struggle is? Like you're almost creating a new thing. So is that what people, I guess, trying to find the balance between if it's legal or not, because it is
Yeah,
technically a new thing, but it originates from things that have already been created?
right. So let's just take an example. Let's just say I I asked the AI machine to make me an artwork in the style of Andy Warhol, right?
Mm,
Now, a lot of these machines now won't do that because of legal issues. It won't say,
sure.
do something in the style, infringe me this, right?
Yeah. Pretty much, right?
Right. But there might be prompts that are less direct that create something that is very Warhol like, right? Maybe
Mm,
you ask about the particular style, or
mm,
you name people in Andy Warhol's orbit, that it imitates. Maybe you throw in Marilyn Monroe with certain colors
right.
on her face that the machine then understands. Okay, well, they want something Warhol like, right?
Mm,
So the machine then grabs all the stuff from the internet and creates what you asked it to create. Let's say the Warhol Foundation saw that and said, "This is exactly an Andy Warhol,"
mhm.
right? I think that unless you're putting in very specific prompts that ask it to imitate something in particular, it's grabbing so much different material that if you're asking it to create something original, then it's very, very unlikely that it's actually going to infringe
Right.
anybody else's work because it's just using millions and millions of bits of information to create something new.
Let me ask you, in terms of, say that the estate or whoever it is that says that this is infringing on their copyright, how does the person that created that, I guess, do they have documentation of what they wrote to get that piece of art or whatever they created? How do you
Yeah,
combat that? Because you can't just show the art and be like, this is my original thing. What did you type in to get that thing?
that would be something that would come up in discovery. Like if you file the lawsuit, you'd
So it's
say, okay,
always
what did you
saved.
put
What
in the
you type is
prompt?
always saved
I'm not
to a
sure,
degree.
but I'm sure that like if somebody did a forensics test, they could probably figure that
Find it.
out.
Yeah.
I think what's less certain and what would be impossible to find out is what went into the machine to create what was created, because a lot of people have come out to say this very publicly. We don't know how these machines are actually creating the works. Like we've created the premise for it, but the learning model is just that. It's constantly evolving and constantly getting better
It's
so
crazy.
that it is creating more creative works. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Speaking of like on the same topic, but a little bit separate, because I know that one of the other major topics was AI's, writing scripts and like dialogue and things like that. Has that been something that has been troublesome for you to kind of navigate as well, working with creators and just like writers?
Yes. Some clients will tell me they're using AI and some won't, right? And the only reason I know that is just because either it comes out later or that's the way people work with lawyers, is they don't always give you the information,
Everything. Yeah.
right? It's just like a student not telling their teacher that they created something with AI. They don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
So,
That's
but
funny.
yeah, I think there's a couple things. One, sometimes if we're representing a producer who's engaging a writer, we'll put in the contract, you may not use AI in writing your screenplay, because we don't want the legal liability if it later comes back that you infringe somebody else's work, right? We just don't want that risk. So you need to come up with it originally. Other producers don't care; they just want a good script, right?
Sure.
So that's been one thing. I think that virtually everybody's going to be using AI tools in a few years, even lawyers.
I mean, I
people
use it on certain aspects, and there are certain
yeah.
benefits that I find from it.
Oh
I really
yeah.
do. Yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, AI is fantastic in many ways. I mean, like for lawyers, the old system of doing things is to try to find a case that addresses a specific legal issue you want. But there's just thousands and thousands of cases, and you have to be really, really good at searching the database to figure out what you want. AI has completely transformed that, because even for the person who's kind of just throwing darts,
Yeah.
can find the case that they're looking for in the jurisdiction that they want. AI has completely changed the game. So, and they even help you write briefs as well. I mean, I'm not a litigator, but I've heard that they do that as well. So
Has this been one of the hardest kind of times for you to learn? Is this one of the hardest things that you've had to kind of learn to navigate as this evolved? Like in your years of law, is this one of the hardest things for you to learn and navigate in this industry?
it is, because I don't have a technical background, right? I'm not, in terms of technology, I'm not on the cutting edge. I think I have enough in order to kind of understand the basics. But the good thing is that as soon as AI kind of popped up on our radar, we knew, because we have a reputation with intellectual property, we wanted to be one of the experts on it. Right. So a lot of clients come to us to ask these very questions that you're asking us, and we want to be thought leaders. So we've written articles about it. We've done interviews about these things. I'm on an advisory board for archival producers who are coming up with guidelines for the use of generative AI. So we're trying to put ourselves out there as people that are in the know. But the issue is no one's really in the know. Like we're all just trying to figure it out after the fact, which is scary, but it's also comforting from our perspective to know that nobody's an expert in this field. No one knows exactly where the law is going to go. And if you find a lawyer who tells you that, run away because they're lying.
There's a line for
They're
sure.
lying. Yeah.
Maybe it's similar with AI or just in general in terms of the entertainment space. Are there some sort of like consistent trends or emerging trends that young filmmakers or first-time people that are working with attorneys should be aware of as they start to, I guess, further themselves into this space?
Well, I think the trends, the things that are affecting us the most right now are AI, a changing distribution landscape. We're not in a great economy right now, particularly in Hollywood. There's been a lot of consolidation. What I'm seeing for independent filmmakers is less buyers, less companies willing to take a risk on risky projects. And if we think about documentaries in particular, I was talking about kind of the quote unquote golden age of documentary filmmaking. That kind of happened 5 or 7 years ago. And now we're kind of coming back to a place where it's contracting a little bit. But they're still making these documentary films, but they're about athletes, they're about teams, they're about bands, artists. So, the Netflix, the Hulus, the Apples, they're betting on safe bets. They're betting on this is a pre-existing, like who's not going to watch a documentary about Derek Jeter, right? It's like,
I would.
right.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
versus this great little film that shot something on a shoestring budget about, this person that nobody knows about, but if you watch it, you'll cry. Right. But that's a bigger risk because how do you promote it?
Of course.
And it's not to say that those platforms aren't doing those. They're just doing it to a lesser extent right now. And there's just just not as much market share for them. So, but the thing about the independent film community is that we've always found a way. Like there will be filmmakers out there that say, I don't care if there's no home for my film. I know exactly what I want to make. It's my story. I'm going to find somebody to finance it and I'm going to find distribution. It's going to live somewhere, right? That's always going to happen. And the question is, in the near future, is there going to be a big enough shift for that to proliferate to the point where I love, a huge burgeoning independent film, environment where it's like sitting alongside the stuff that everybody loves, which is the tentpole studio films. And it's like, that's great, but we also need this other stuff.
Absolutely.
Right. So those are the two big things. I mean, I think for filmmakers, the stuff that's always important is, again, you got to understand when to go to an attorney. The biggest mistake that I see filmmakers make at an early stage is thinking that you don't need an agreement with someone when you do, right? You go into a collaboration, you say, this is my best friend, we're making this film.
Yeah.
And then 6 months
Especially
later,
when it comes to like, maybe asking for points on the back end or like agreeing with I had a similar experience where, so like maybe I should have asked for something that I didn't. It is what it is, but you're absolutely right. It's doing something before something potentially blows up where your friend might not be your friend who is going to give you that thing anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot of it is, and this is me in everyday life too, right? It's, you don't want to mess with a good situation. You don't want to make an uncomfortable ask when everything is going really, really well.
Right.
But the problem is if you don't make that ask now when things aren't going well, or you realize you're not going to get what you thought you were going to get, it's too late at that point. Yeah.
In terms of distribution, a personal experience, I shot a feature film about 2 years ago, and the director happened to be a very popular has a YouTube presence. I think over 300 and something thousand subscribers. And he struggled with like finding distribution, but ended up using his audience that he built in to do crowdfunding to be able to actually fund the film. And then, once the film was created, struggled to get buyers. We got into, I think we submitted to 12 festivals. We got into 10 and we won 9 of them, I believe. So it did really well, but it was hard for him to actually get people to want to buy it. So he then ended up just releasing it on his website for a certain price, added some behind the scenes, an interview as some like additional benefit to buying it. But it's all because he kind of built an audience prior to doing that. And a lot of what people are talking about on YouTube specific to this film and him is that this is like a new style of distribution that people are looking into that otherwise wasn't even accessible to people back then. But
Yeah.
obviously takes a lot of work to build an audience like that.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely a huge thing of what's coming, but it's already, starting to happen. It goes back to a basic principle of film distribution and marketing, which is leverage the existing market that you already have, right? Whether that's in the form of an A-list actor, right, that a traditional distributor is going to be very excited about. We put it on the service, everybody's going to watch this actor. No, it doesn't matter what they're in,
Dwayne
right?
Johnson.
Right. Yeah. So you get Dwayne Johnson in your film, forget about it. But for everybody else, it's like, okay, who here has a big following, right? How do we leverage the audience that we already have, the baked in audience? And sometimes
That was interesting because the director had the biggest audience compared to any of the actors. The actors really didn't have any audience at all. It was the filmmakers that had the audience.
Yeah. And some don't have any at all. And that's,
of course,
that's
especially new
one.
first-time directors. Nobody knows them really.
Right. So you were in a position where you could leverage a specific targeted audience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He had 300 and something thousand. Our executive producer has over 1 million. Myself, I have just about 50,000. And us three combined had a bigger audience than anyone a part of the project. And we were the ones that kind of did a lot of the marketing and selling of the actual film.
Yeah. Well,
which is really, it's interesting.
Yeah. And it sounds like it did pretty well.
I think it did well. Yeah. It ended up getting on Amazon Prime after a while. But it was just really cool to see that, obviously I didn't have any input on the distribution of what he decided to do with the producers, but it was cool to see that he trusted his audience enough to sell it himself. And people who really believe in him, have been following him for years, committed and wanted and supported it, which is really awesome to see.
Yeah, it's great. And I think that's one of the, obviously it's been happening for a while, but it's just one of the benefits of technology is this opening, this democratization of ingesting content, right? It's like, I like this person, whatever they're going to put out, I'm going to watch it. It doesn't have to be on, television doesn't have to be on a streaming platform. It can be just wherever that person lives, it puts it on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's cool.
Well, my last question for you, let me think about it, actually. I guess where you are now in your life, I always have to try to remember like the beginning of the conversation to kind of call back to. I forgot for a sec. Where you are in your life right now, you're sitting across the table from that younger version of you that just graduated school and you first start your day at this law firm. What advice would you give that younger version of you 15 years ago?
I actually wouldn't. I just would say, just keep doing what you're doing. And that's not to say that I did everything right. Yeah. It's just that I'm so happy with where I ended up that I would be afraid to change the course of the future, that you make the mistakes that you're going to make, you're going to learn from those, you're going to have this moment in your life that is going to be transformative and make you a much happier person. You're going to find work-life balance, and you're going to be dealing with stuff like new problems that you're going to have to figure out. And it's not time for that yet, but maybe when you're 50 or 60, you'll figure that shit out and have new problems.
New problems.
The takeaway is the problems never end, right? And you're never going to get to that point where like you figured everything out. It's just, you have to fall in love with the work of getting better. Amazing. All the time. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out to you, connect with you? Feel free to share whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Sure. Yeah. So the firm, you can find us at donaldsoncarloperez.com. Also on Instagram at DCP Firm, and on LinkedIn, I think.
Cool.
Yeah. So.
All right. Have a good day, everyone. Thank you. Have a great day and peace out.